The great hall of Dragonstone had witnessed many momentous occasions throughout its long history, but none quite like this. Queen Daenerys Targaryen sat upon the ancient throne of her ancestors, her violet eyes fixed on the unlikely assembly before her. To her left stood Tyrion Lannister, her hand, his face a mask of diplomatic composure despite the audacity of what he was about to propose. To her right, Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen, shifted uncomfortably, his bastard's instincts still warring with his newfound royal identity. Before them, under heavy guard but unshackled, stood Jaime Lannister. The Kingslayer's golden hair had grown longer during his captivity, and his green eyes held a weariness that spoke of battles fought both on fields and within his own conscience. His right hand rested naturally at his side. The golden replacement that Qyburn had crafted still gleamed, but it no longer defined him as it once had. The proposal that hung in the air between them was so outrageous, so politically brilliant, and so personally devastating that even the dragons seemed to sense the tension. Drogon's rumbling growl echoed from the courtyard below, where he perched like a living reminder of the Targaryen power that had brought them all to this moment. "Your Grace," Tyrion began, his voice carrying the weight of desperate hope, "the realm bleeds. Every day we delay costs thousands of lives. The Golden Company still holds King's Landing, Cersei's loyalists control the Westerlands, and the North grows restless under foreign rule. We need a solution that doesn't involve burning the Seven Kingdoms to ash." Daenerys' fingers drummed against the armrest of her throne, each tap echoing in the silence. "And you believe that marrying me to your brother, the man who killed my father, will somehow bring peace to Westeros?" "I believe," Tyrion said carefully, "that it's the only way to unite the claims that tear this realm apart. A marriage between fire and gold, between Targaryen restoration and Lannister power. It would legitimize your rule to those who still question it, while offering clemency to those who fought against you." Jaime spoke for the first time since entering the hall, his voice rough from disuse. "I killed your father because he was about to burn King's Landing and everyone in it, including my own family. If you're asking me to marry you to prevent another massacre, then we're having the same conversation 20 years later." The words hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Daenerys rose from her throne, her silver-gold hair catching the light from the torches. "You dare lecture me about mercy, Kingslayer? You, who served the man who had my brother and mother murdered?" "I serve the realm," Jaime replied evenly. "Just as I'm serving it now by considering this madness. Do you think I want to marry the daughter of the man whose death haunts my dreams? Do you think I want to tie my fate to dragons and fire?" Stepped forward, his hand instinctively moving to Longclaw's hilt. "Perhaps we should consider other options." "What other options?" Daenerys whirled to face him, her violet eyes blazing. "Storm King's Landing and lose half our forces? Lay siege for months while small folks starve? Burn the Red Keep and become the monster they already think I am?" She turned back to Jaime. At least he's honest about his motivations. The conversation that followed would reshape the Seven Kingdoms forever. The next 3 days saw negotiations that would have impressed even the Iron Bank of Braavos. Tyrion had crafted a proposal so intricate, so politically sophisticated, that it addressed nearly every concern that had kept Westeros in chaos. The marriage would be one of state, not love. That much was clear from the beginning. Daenerys would remain Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, with Jaime as her prince consort. The title carried weight without threatening her absolute authority. More importantly, it would signal to the realm that House Lannister had bent the knee completely, bringing their considerable wealth and remaining military strength into the Targaryen fold. Cersei's fate was the most delicate point of negotiation. The queen on the Iron Throne had barricaded herself in the Red Keep with what remained of the Golden Company, but her position was untenable. The marriage would offer her a path to surrender with dignity. exile to Essos with a generous allowance, rather than execution or imprisonment. "She'll never accept it," Jaime said during one of their private sessions. "Cersei would rather burn than bend." "Then we'll deal with that when it comes," Daenerys replied. "But we have to try. I won't be remembered as the queen who murdered her way to power." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Here was the daughter of the Mad King, trying to avoid the mistakes that had defined her father's reign, negotiating with the very man who had ended Aerys's madness with his blade. Jon remained the wild card in their calculations. His claim to the Iron Throne was arguably stronger than Daenerys's, a fact that everyone carefully avoided mentioning directly. The marriage would effectively sideline him, making him redundant in the new political order. Yet his support was crucial. Without the loyalty of the North, any peace would be temporary at best. "I never wanted the throne," Jon told Daenerys privately on the second night of negotiations. "You know that, but I can't support something that goes against everything I believe in." "And what do you believe in?" she asked, genuinely curious. "That power should serve the people, not the other way around. That the strong should protect the weak. That honor matters more than expediency." He paused, studying her face in the flickering candlelight. "Do you believe those things?" The question cut deeper than he perhaps intended. Daenerys had spent years telling herself that everything she did was for the greater good, that the ends justified the means. But sitting in the same castle where her ancestors had ruled, negotiating a marriage to a man she should hate, she found herself questioning everything. "I want to," she said finally. "I want to be the queen who brought peace to Westeros, but I also want to be the queen who survived to see it." What no one anticipated was how quickly Jaime and Daenerys would find common ground. Both carried the weight of their father's legacies. She the daughter of the Mad King, he the son of Tywin Lannister. Both had made choices that defined them in the eyes of the world, choices that they lived with every day. Their first real conversation came on. The third night, when Daenerys found Jaime standing on the battlements of Dragonstone, staring out at the narrow sea. "Do you regret it?" she asked, joining him at the stone railing. "Killing my father?" Jaime was quiet for a long moment. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that I was the only one willing to do it. I regret that it defined the rest of my life." He turned to look at her. "But I don't regret saving 500,000 lives. Do you regret burning King's Landing?" The question hit her like a physical blow. In the immediate aftermath of her victory, she had justified the destruction as necessary, as the price of ending tyranny. But in the weeks since, the weight of all those deaths had settled on her shoulders like a cloak of lead. "I regret that I became the thing I swore to destroy," she said quietly. "I regret that fear and anger made me forget why I wanted the throne in the first place." "Then we're both killers trying to find redemption," Jaime said. "Perhaps that's something to build on." Their conversation was interrupted by commotion from the courtyard below. A raven had arrived from King's Landing, bearing news that would change everything. Cersei Lannister was dead, killed not by enemies but by wildfire that had detonated in the Red Keep's lower levels. The explosion had been massive, destroying much of the ancient fortress and killing thousands. The message was brief but devastating. "The Queen is dead. Long live the Queen." Qyburn. Jaime's reaction was not what anyone expected. Instead of grief or rage, his face showed something closer to relief. "She's free," he said simply. Finally free of the madness that consumed her. Daenerys watched him carefully, seeing in his expression the same complex mix of love and loss that she felt when thinking of her own family. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Aerys, you?" he asked, not unkindly. "She was your enemy. She cost you everything." "She was also the woman you loved," Daenerys replied. "That has to count for something." The news from King's Landing changed the entire dynamic of their negotiations. With Cersei dead and the Red Keep partially destroyed, the immediate threat, Iun to Daenerys' rule, was eliminated. The marriage alliance was no longer a military necessity. It was now a political choice. The war council that convened the next morning was unlike any in the history of Westeros. Present were Daenerys Targaryen, Jon Snow, Tyrion Lannister, Jaime Lannister, Sir Davos Seaworth, Samwell Tarly, and, via Raven, representatives from every major house in the Seven Kingdoms. The question before them was simple. Would they proceed? With the marriage alliance now that its primary military purpose had been achieved? Tyrion argued for proceeding. Your Grace, the realm needs stability more than ever. The Red Keep's destruction has created a power vacuum. Without strong leadership and clear succession, we'll have another civil war within a year. Ser Davos agreed. The small folk are tired of war, Your Grace. They want to know that their rulers are committed to peace. A marriage alliance signals that commitment better than any proclamation. Sam raised a different concern. The Maesters are already writing the histories of this war. How do you want to be remembered? As the queen who conquered through marriage and diplomacy, or as the one who won through fire and blood alone? Jon remained quiet through most of the discussion, but his opinion carried enormous weight. When Daenerys finally asked for his thoughts, his response surprised everyone. "I think you should marry him," he said quietly. "Not because it's politically expedient, not because it ends the war, but because I've watched you both over these past few days. You understand each other in ways that most people never will. You've both made terrible choices and lived with the consequences. Maybe that's what the realm needs, rulers who understand the cost of power." Jaime and Daenerys exchanged a look across the table. Something had shifted between them during their negotiations, something neither had expected when this alliance was first proposed. "What do you say, Kingslayer?" Daenerys asked, using the title without malice for the first time. "Will you marry the Mad King's daughter?" Jaime's smile was slight but genuine. "If the Dragon Queen will have the Kingslayer, then yes. For the realm." "For the realm," she agreed. The ceremony took place 3 weeks later in the Sept of Remembrance, the great temple that had been built on the ruins of the Sept of Baelor. The symbolism was intentional. From the ashes of the old world, a new one would rise. The wedding was unlike any that Westeros had ever seen. Instead of the traditional Targaryen ceremony or the Faith of the Sevens ritual, they crafted something entirely new. The vows they spoke were their own, written in the days leading up to the ceremony. "I, Daenerys of House Targaryen, take you, Jaime of House Lannister, not as conqueror to conquered, but as partner to partner. I promise to rule with mercy as well as strength, to protect the innocent as well as punish the guilty, and to build rather than burn. I, Jaime of House Lannister, take you, Daenerys of House Targaryen, not as subject to sovereign, but as equal to equal. I promise to serve the realm before myself, to speak truth in the face of power, and to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them." The ceremony was witnessed by representatives from every corner of the Seven Kingdoms. The North was represented by Sansa Stark, who had traveled south despite her reservations about Southern politics. The Vale sent Robin Arryn, now grown into a competent young lord under Tyrion's guidance. The Riverlands, the Reach, the Stormlands, all sent their highest nobles to witness this historic union. But perhaps the most significant witness was the small folk of King's Landing. Thousands gathered outside the Sept, cheering not for conquest or domination, but for the promise of peace. For the first time in years, they dared to hope that the wars might finally be over. The wedding feast was held in the newly constructed Great Hall, built where the Red Keep's throne room had once stood. The Iron Throne had been destroyed in Cersei's final conflagration, and in its place sat 2 simple chairs of dragonstone. Side by side, rather than one elevated above the other. During the feast, Jaime rose to address the assembled nobles. His words would be remembered for generations. "Lords and ladies of Westeros," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. 20 years ago, I broke the most sacred oath a knight can make. I killed the king I had sworn to protect. Today, I make a new oath, not to a person, but to a principle. I swear to serve the realm, to protect the innocent, and to ensure that the mistakes of the past are not repeated. Daenerys stood beside him, her own words carrying equal weight. "House Targaryen once conquered the 7 kingdoms through fire and blood. Today, we choose a different path. We choose to rule through justice and mercy, through strength tempered by wisdom. The age of conquest is over. The age of cooperation begins now." The first years of the Lannister-Targaryen reign were marked by unprecedented cooperation between the crown and the great houses. The new system of governance that emerged was revolutionary in its structure. Instead of ruling through fear and absolute authority, Daenerys and Jaime established what they called the Council of Kingdoms, a formal body where each region had a voice in matters affecting the entire realm. The North retained significant autonomy under Sansa Stark's leadership, but remained part of the 7 kingdoms through bonds of mutual respect rather than conquest. The economic reforms were equally dramatic. The crown's debts to the Iron Bank were restructured through a combination of Lannister gold and Targaryen diplomacy. Trade agreements with Essos brought unprecedented prosperity to Westeros, while infrastructure projects, roads, harbors, granaries, provided employment for thousands of displaced soldiers and refugees. But perhaps the most significant change was in how power was exercised. Gone were the days of arbitrary justice and royal caprice. A new legal code was established, one that applied equally to lord and commoner alike. The restoration of the faith militant was rejected, but a new institution, the King's Peace, was created to ensure justice throughout the realm. Jaime proved to be an unexpectedly effective ruler. His years as a knight had given him an understanding of both warfare and peacekeeping, while his time as Cersei's twin had taught him the dangers of unchecked power. He became known for his ability to find common ground between opposing factions, using his wit and hard-won wisdom to diffuse conflicts before they could escalate. Daenerys, meanwhile, channeled her fierce intelligence into administrative reform. The dragons, rather than being instruments of war, became symbols of the crown's ability to reach anywhere in the realm quickly. Drogon's flights to remote regions brought both aid during disasters and swift justice for those who would prey on the innocent. What the histories would not record, however, was the personal price both rulers paid for their political success. The marriage that had begun as a diplomatic necessity had evolved into something more complex, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared burden rather than love. They slept in separate chambers, maintained separate social circles, and rarely appeared in public without the formal dignity their positions demanded. Yet those closest to them observed moments of genuine connection, quiet conversations in the Godswood, shared glances during council meetings, and a protective instinct that went beyond political alliance. Jon Snow, who had accepted a position as Lord Commander of a reformed Night's Watch, visited King's Landing regularly. During one such visit, he found Daenerys alone in the throne room, staring at the twin chairs that symbolized their reign. "Do you regret it?" he asked, echoing the question she had once posed to Jaime. "Which part?" she replied without turning around. "The marriage, the throne, or the choices that brought me here?" "All of it." Daenerys was quiet for a long moment. "I regret that love isn't always enough. I regret that duty often demands sacrifices that leave scars on the soul. But I don't regret the peace we've built, even if it cost us the chance for personal happiness. And Jaime? Jaime understands the cost of duty better than anyone. We're both prisoners of our own nobility, I suppose. The irony would be amusing, if it weren't so painful. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a messenger bearing news from the north. Sansa Stark had given birth to her first child, a daughter she had named Lyanna in honor of her aunt. The realm celebrated the birth as a symbol of renewal and hope. That night, for the first time since their wedding, Jaime and Daenerys sat together in her chambers, sharing wine and conversation as equals rather than rulers. "Do you ever wonder what our children would be like?" she asked suddenly. The question hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they wanted to cross. They had discussed the matter of succession in council meetings, but never in private, never as a man and woman, rather than as king and queen. "I wonder if they would have my father's ruthlessness or your father's madness," Jaime replied honestly. "I wonder if they would be strong enough to rule without becoming monsters." "They would be ours," Daenerys said simply. "That would have to be enough." The conversation that followed lasted until dawn, touching on subjects they had never dared discuss: their fears, their hopes, their dreams for a realm at peace. When the sun rose over King's Landing, something had changed between them. Not love, perhaps, but something deeper than mere alliance. Their partnership faced its greatest test 3 years into their reign, when reports arrived of a new threat from across the narrow sea. Daario Naharis, Daenerys' former lover and commander of the Second Sons, had united the remaining Dothraki Khals and was sailing toward Westeros with an army of 50,000 warriors. The news divided the council. Some urged immediate military action, while others counseled diplomacy. Jaime and Daenerys found themselves on opposite sides of the debate for the first time since their marriage. "He's coming for you," Jaime said during a private council meeting. "This isn't about conquest, it's personal. We need to meet him with overwhelming force. If we respond with violence, we prove that nothing has changed," Daenerys countered. "The realm needs to see that we've moved beyond the old ways of solving problems with swords and fire. And if diplomacy fails, if he lands on our shores and starts burning villages, then we'll stop him. But we try peace first." Their disagreement played out in full view of the court, leading to speculation about cracks in their alliance. Some lords began hedging their bets, wondering if the Lannister-Targaryen partnership was as solid as it appeared. The crisis came to a head when Daario's fleet was spotted off the coast of Dragonstone, instead of sailing directly to King's Landing. However, the ships anchored in the bay and sent a single envoy ashore, Daario himself, under a flag of parley. The reunion between Daenerys and her former lover was watched by the entire court. Daario had changed little in the years since they had parted. Still handsome, still dangerous, still radiating the charisma that had once drawn her to him. "My queen," he said, offering a mocking bow. "You look well. Marriage to a Lannister agrees with you." "What do you want, Daario?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "I want what was promised to me. You said you would return to Essos, that we would rule together. Instead, I find you playing house with the Kingslayer." Jaime stepped forward, his hand resting on his sword hilt. "You're speaking to the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. Show some respect." Daario's laugh was sharp and bitter. The Queen of the Seven Kingdoms? She was the mother of dragons, the breaker of chains, the unburnt. Now she's just another southern queen, playing politics and making compromises. The insult hit its mark, but Daenerys' response surprised everyone. "You're right, I was those things once. But titles are just words, Daario. What matters is what we do with the power we have. And what have you done? Married your enemy? Traded your dragons for a crown? Where is the woman who freed Slaver's Bay?" "She grew up," Daenerys replied simply. "She learned that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when not to use your power." The confrontation that followed would be remembered as one of the most dramatic moments in Westerosi history. Daario challenged Jaime to single combat, claiming the right to fight for Daenerys' hand. Under the old traditions, such a challenge could not be refused, but Daenerys surprised everyone by refusing to let the combat take place. "I am not a prize to be won," she declared. "I am a queen who chose her consort, not a maiden waiting to be claimed. If you want to fight someone, Dario, fight me." The challenge was unprecedented. Queens did not engage in single combat, especially not with former lovers seeking to reclaim them. But Daenerys had made her decision, and nothing would dissuade her. The duel took place on the beach of Dragonstone, witnessed by representatives from across the Seven Kingdoms. Dario fought with his traditional arak, while Daenerys chose a Valyrian steel sword that had been reforged from ice, Ned Stark's ancestral blade. The fight was brief but decisive. Dario's skill was undeniable, but Daenerys had been training with some of the finest swordsmen in Westeros. More importantly, she was fighting not for conquest or glory, but for the right to choose her own path. When Dario fell, defeated, but not killed, Daenerys offered him a choice: return to Essos and never trouble Westeros again, or face execution as a foreign invader. He chose exile, sailing away with his remaining ships and taking with him the last remnant of Daenerys' old life. The victory over Dario marked a turning point in both the realm and the royal marriage. That night, for the first time since their wedding, Jaime and Daenerys came together not as political allies but as man and woman, finding in each other not love but something equally valuable: understanding and respect. 9 months later, Queen Daenerys gave birth to twins, a son they named Aemon, after the maester who had served at the Wall, and a daughter they called Visenya, after the Targaryen queen who had helped conquer Westeros. The birth was celebrated throughout the realm as a sign that the new dynasty would endure. The children grew up in a court unlike any that had existed before. They were raised not just as royalty but as servants of the realm, taught that power was a tool to be used for the good of others rather than personal glory. Aemon showed his father's strategic mind and his mother's fierce determination, while Visenya displayed a quick wit and an unusual talent for diplomacy. More importantly, they were raised in a world at peace. The wars that had torn Westeros apart were fading into memory, replaced by an era of prosperity and cooperation. The lessons of their parents' generation, that power corrupts, that vengeance breeds more vengeance, that the strong must protect the weak, had been learned and internalized. Historians would later call it the Golden Age of Westeros, 20 years of peace and prosperity that began with an unlikely marriage and ended only when age and time claimed its architects. During those 2 decades, the Seven Kingdoms were transformed from a realm torn by war into one united by common purpose. The infrastructure projects that began in the early years of the reign expanded into a comprehensive rebuilding of the kingdom. Roads connected the most remote villages to major cities. Harbors facilitated trade with distant lands, and granaries ensured that no region would face starvation alone. The legal reforms proved equally transformative. The establishment of magistrates in every major town meant that justice was no longer the province of lords alone, but a service provided by the crown to all its subjects. The creation of the King's Peace, a force of trained investigators and peacekeepers, brought law and order to regions that had known only chaos. Perhaps most importantly, the cultural changes that began with the royal marriage spread throughout the realm. The old traditions of trial by combat and blood feuds gave way to negotiation and compromise. Houses that had been enemies for generations found common ground in shared prosperity. The dragons, rather than being symbols of conquest, became emblems of protection. Drogon's regular flights throughout the realm brought both aid during disasters and swift justice for those who would prey on the innocent. The sight of the great beast overhead became a source of comfort rather than terror. As Aemon and Visenya, came of age, questions arose about the succession that would have torn apart previous dynasties. Both children showed remarkable aptitude for leadership, but the realm's laws were unclear about inheritance when twins were involved. The solution, when it came, was typically innovative. Rather than choosing between their children, Jaime and Daenerys proposed a revolutionary change to the monarchy itself. The Seven Kingdoms would be ruled by a dual crown, two monarchs sharing power, each bringing their own strengths to the governance of the realm. Aemon would inherit the military and judicial aspects of royal authority, while Visenya would oversee trade, diplomacy, and domestic policy. The arrangement required new laws and customs, but it offered something that single-ruler succession could not: stability through redundancy and the assurance that no single person would hold absolute power. The transition was not without its challenges. Some lords questioned whether a woman could hold royal authority, while others worried about conflicts between the twin rulers. But Aemon and Visenya had been raised to work together, and their complementary skills made them more effective than either could have been alone. Their coronation, held on the 20th anniversary of their parents' marriage, marked not just a change in rulers, but the beginning of a new era in Westerosi governance. The age of absolute monarchy was ending, replaced by something more nuanced and sustainable. Jaime and Daenerys lived to see their children's children, retiring from active rule but remaining available as advisors and counselors. They spent their final years not in the Red Keep, but at Dragonstone, where their unlikely alliance had first taken shape. Their last public appearance together was at the dedication of the Memorial to the Fallen, a monument erected in King's Landing, to honor all those who had died in the wars that preceded their reign. The inscription, written in their own hands, read simply, "Let their sacrifice not be forgotten, and let it not be repeated." Jaime died first, passing peacefully in his sleep, at the age of 73. His funeral was attended by representatives from across the known world, a testament to the respect he had earned not as the Kingslayer, but as the peacemaker. Daenerys spoke at his funeral, her words carrying the weight of decades of partnership. "He was not the man I expected to marry," she said. "He was better. He taught me that honor is not about being perfect, but about making the right choice when it matters most. He showed me that love comes in many forms, and that respect and partnership can be more enduring than passion." Daenerys followed him, 6 months later, dying as she had lived in her final years, surrounded by family and secure in the knowledge that her life's work would endure. Her last words, spoken to her granddaughter, were, "Remember that power is not about what you can take, but what you choose to give." The marriage of Daenerys Targaryen and Jaime Lannister lasted 28 years and changed the course of Westerosi history. What began as a desperate political alliance evolved into something unprecedented, a partnership that transformed not just a kingdom, but the very concept of rulership itself. Their legacy was not measured in conquests or monuments, but in the peace that outlasted them both. The golden age they ushered in extended for generations, creating a template for governance that would influence the Seven Kingdoms for centuries to come. The dragons eventually died out, as dragons always do, but the principles they represented, protection of the innocent, service to the realm, and the understanding that true strength comes from restraint rather than destruction, became part of the kingdom's cultural foundation. In the end, the most unlikely marriage in Westerosi history became its most successful, proving that sometimes the greatest victories are won not through conquest, but through the courage to choose cooperation over conflict, understanding over hatred, and hope over despair. The songs would remember the Dragon Queen and the Kingslayer not as enemies who became lovers, but as two broken people who found in each other the strength to heal a broken realm. Their story became a testament to the transformative power of choice, the choice to be better than what came before, to build rather than destroy, and to trust in the possibility of redemption even for those who seemed beyond saving. In the crypts, Beneath Dragonstone, where they were laid to rest together, their tomb bears a simple inscription: "They chose peace." For a world that had known little but war, it was the greatest epitaph of all.